It began as a tragedy. It ended as a revelation. When the world turned its eyes to Paris on April 15th, 2019, we weren't just watching a fire. We were watching the potential death of history. The images were searing. The iconic spire engulfed in flames, snapping like a twig and piercing the vault below. The roof, known as the forest because it was built from 5,000 ancient oak trees, was turning into an inferno. The fire raged from evening until the next morning, and for several terrifying hours, firefighters believed the entire structure might collapse. It was a narrow escape. But when the smoke cleared and the ashes cooled, the cathedral looked different. The fire had done something no archaeologist would ever be allowed to do. It had ripped open the sealed layers of the past. The disaster had cracked the floor open. It had stripped the plaster from the walls. In the debris, hiding in the shadows of the burnt timber, were secrets that had been kept for centuries. From bodies buried beneath the floorboards to an engineering marvel hidden inside the walls, and even codes that hint at the legendary Philosopher's Stone. The fire didn't just destroy, it revealed, and the first thing it gave us was the dead. Once the site was secured, a team of 50 archaeologists descended into the ruins. They weren't looking for gold. They were sifting through the debris of the transept crossing, the very heart of the cathedral where the spire had crashed down, and there, buried beneath the rubble, the ground had opened up to reveal two anthropomorphic lead sarcophagi. Now you have to understand the significance of this. In the 18th century, a lead coffin wasn't just a container, it was a statement. It was a privilege reserved for the ultra-wealthy or the ultra-holy, designed to hermetically seal the body and preserve it against the rot of time. When scientists dressed in protective hazmat suits to guard against the toxic lead dust finally cracked these seals, they found two very different stories. The first coffin bore a brass epitaph. It belonged to Antoine de la Porte, a wealthy canon of the cathedral who died in 1710 on Christmas Eve. He was 83 years old. Inside, the preservation had partially failed, leaving only bones, hair, and scraps of fabric. But forensic science allows the dead to speak. His bones told the researchers that Antoine had lived a sedentary life, largely immobile. His body was riddled with gout, a painful disease often associated with the rich, meat-heavy diets of the aristocracy. He had spent his fortune on the cathedral, paying for the choir and commissioning paintings that hang in the Louvre today. He had literally bought his place in the center of the church. But the second coffin, that was the real anomaly. It held no nameplate, no epitaph, just the bones of a man between 25 and 40. And unlike the wealthy canon, this man had lived a life of physical agony. His pelvic bones showed he was an expert. Horseman, riding from childhood. His teeth were destroyed. His skull had been artificially deformed by a tight headband worn in infancy, a sign of high status in 16th century France. But the autopsy of the bones revealed a darker truth. He suffered from chronic meningitis and tuberculosis. Who was he? Why was a man who wasn't a high-ranking church official buried in the most sacred spot of the cathedral? Forensic evidence now points to Joachim du Bellay, a famous French poet of the Renaissance. We know du Bellay was a skilled writer. We know he suffered from debilitating headaches and lung issues that match the skeleton's pathology perfectly, and we know he died young. But history says he was buried in a side chapel, not here. So why was he found under the spire? Was he moved secretly? Was his burial a temporary favor that became permanent? Even now, without a final DNA confirmation, the Horseman of Notre Dame remains a ghost in the machine, a mystery solved only by the flames that nearly destroyed his tomb. The fire didn't just expose the dead, it exposed the genius of the living. For centuries, architects and engineers have looked at Notre Dame and asked the same question. How? How does a building with such incredibly thin walls support a vaulted ceiling over 100 feet high? The math seemed almost impossible for the 12th century. The Gothic style is all about height and light, but stone is heavy. Gravity should have pulled this building down a long time ago. When the timber roof burned away and the plaster crumbled, the answer was left naked in the daylight. Sticking out of the charred stones were thousands of iron staples. This discovery changed everything we knew about medieval construction. Before this, historians assumed builders used wooden rods for stability, but wood rots and snaps. The builders of Notre Dame did something revolutionary. revolutionary. They created an iron skeleton. They used iron staples, each about 20 inches long and weighing several pounds, to bind the stones together. They literally reinforced the cathedral with metal, centuries before modern rebar was invented. It was an industrial innovation hidden behind a religious facade. They sank these iron claws into the stone to create a structure that looked like it was held up by faith and magic, when in reality it was held up by heavy metal engineering. This iron skeleton allowed them to build higher and thinner than anyone else. It was a trick so effective that churches across Europe began copying the aesthetic, never realizing they were imitating a hidden skeleton they couldn't even see. The fire revealed that Notre Dame was the prototype for the modern skyscraper. It's easy to think of Notre Dame as this eternal, unchanging monolith, but the fire reminded us that the cathedral has almost died before. In the early 19th century, after the French Revolution, the building wasn't a beloved icon. It was a wreck. Revolutionaries had beheaded the statues of the kings of Judah, mistaking them for French kings. The windows were smashed. The walls were black with soot. It was being used as a warehouse, and the Parisians, tired of the gloomy, crumbling Gothic style, actually signed petitions to demolish it. They wanted to use the stones to build bridges. The cathedral was saved by a book. When Victor Hugo published The Hunchback of Notre Dame, he didn't just write a romance, he wrote a desperate love letter to architecture. The novel became a global sensation. Suddenly, the Parisians saw the beauty in the ruin. A massive restoration project began, led by the architect Eugène Viollet-le-Duc. But here's the twist. Much of what burned in 2019, and much of what we mourn, wasn't medieval. It was a 19th century fantasy. The famous gargoyles, they weren't there originally. They were added by Viollet-le-Duc. The chimera looking over the Paris skyline, added in the 1800s. Even the spire that we watched fall was a 19th century addition, weighing 750 tons. The gargoyles, while looking like ancient demons, were actually brilliant plumbing. They were designed to channel rainwater away from the foundation to stop erosion. They were functional drain pipes dressed up as nightmares. The cathedral is a patchwork of history, a blend of the 12th century and the 19th, held together by that iron skeleton and the collective will of the people to keep it standing. If we look even closer at the stones that survived the heat, we find things that the church might prefer to ignore. Shadows of the occult. In the 1920s, a mysterious book titled The Mystery of the Cathedrals claimed that Notre Dame wasn't just a church. It was a textbook of alchemy etched in stone. And the evidence is compelling. On the North Tower, there is a carving. It's not a saint. It's not an angel. It is a figure wearing a Phrygian hat, the traditional symbol of the alchemist. He stares intently at the stones, as if guarding a secret. Move to the main entrance, the portal of the Last Judgment, and you find strange symbolism. There is a carving of a woman holding a ladder with 9 steps, the Scala Philosophorum, or the Ladder of the Philosophers. This represents the 9 stages of alchemical transmutation required to create the Philosopher's Stone. Nearby, a figure holds a shield bearing the caduceus, the staff of Hermes, and the symbol of Mercury, the key element in the quest to turn lead into gold. Some theorists even believe the angles of the statues, an angel pointing one way, an eagle pointing the same direction, form a map to a location on the left bank of the Seine where the Philosopher's Stone is supposedly hidden. But if alchemy represents the search for light, the doors represent the darkness. The ironwork on the side doors of Notre Dame is exquisite, complex, swirling arabesques that seem impossible to forge by hand, especially in the Middle Ages. Legend says they were made by a young smith named Biscornet. The job was too big, the deadline too tight. Overwhelmed, Biscornet is said to have called out for help, and something answered. The next day the doors were finished. The ironwork was flawless. But the patterns were disturbing. The swirls seemed to form the number 666. When the priests tried to open the doors for the first time, they were stuck fast. They only opened after being sprinkled with holy water. And the name of the smith? Biscornet. In French, it roughly translates to two-horned. He died shortly after, his body failing from a mysterious illness. To the medieval mind, the price had been paid. The devil had crafted the doors, and he had taken the smith's soul as his fee. From the bones of a hidden poet to the iron in the walls and the alchemical codes on the facade, Notre Dame is more than a building. It is a puzzle box. The fire of 2019 was a tragedy, but it acted as a violent key, unlocking doors we didn't even know were there. It makes you wonder, what else is hiding in the walls of the world's most famous monuments, just waiting for the right disaster to reveal them? If you want to uncover more secrets hidden in plain sight, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe. There are plenty more mysteries to solve, and we're just getting started.